what does the maximalist community have? Like I've criticized it, but let me actually say certain things that, it's very complicated because maximalism has, sorry, way of putting this. Many of the things that they say are things where I agree with some or all of it. But it reminds me of, it's like somebody who's a progressive and they would agree with many statements about how you need to have equity and, not discriminate against people and so on. But then they see people saying those things going and burning down Black businesses. And that's like completely the opposite of what you actually seem to want ideologically, right? This is harming these people that you're claiming to help, right? So the words don't match the actions necessarily. If the words are, in this case, for greater freedom and so on, why are you arguing for like governments to crack down? Why are you arguing for willing buyer, willing seller to stop? Why are you trying to pathologize capitalism? That doesn't seem to make any sense, right? And that's because I think it's gotten maximalism gotten twisted in this ideological knot, which unfortunately is going to be very helpful. That's the paradox. You're like, what? Why? That's an unusual. Here's the thing. I know I'm digressing, but I'll bring it home. Okay.
Yeah. And then I also want to hear what Bitcoin would need to do, or what would need to happen, or what will happen to make Bitcoin behave in the way that so many holders, such as myself, would like it to behave.
Totally.
In terms.
So the answer is, one of the things I've learned over the last 10 years, 15 years, is the value of irrationality. All the other people in Web3 basically are in it for technology or finance or something like that, right? Maximalists are in it for fundamentally political / moral / social / ethical kind of things. I think there's a continuum where, as I said, some of the words I agree with, but a lot of the actions and behavior I don't. Still, I recognize the zeal. And zeal really, really, really matters. Zeal matters because zeal is the difference between selling when it's low, and zeal is the difference between selling never. Zeal is the difference between talking to everybody about it all the time and making it your life, and just having it be one component of an otherwise healthy life. Zeal means putting it at the top of your identity stack, putting it in your profile, having it be part of your existence. Like, the top of your identity stack, that's really precious space. What you identify yourself as, you might live in Missouri, but might not identify yourself as a Missourian. You might identify yourself as a Bitcoiner or as a Christian or as a Republican or something. That top identity thing is really important. And that's something that maximalists have. And so what I think is actually going to happen is the political spectrum will rotate. I think, imagine adding yellow, a splash of yellow, so that red-blue becomes orange versus green. Okay? And orange versus green rotates it. And so it's Bitcoin orange versus dollar green. And on the dollar green side are actually quite a few Republicans, a lot of the, security state people, military people, neocons, folks who basically side with, at the end of the day, they will choose the American flag and they'll choose the US government and so on. And on the other side is Bitcoin orange. And here, actually, lots of Democrats will actually choose this side. And for example, like Jack Dorsey, like Glenn Greenwald, like a lot of the Substackers, like a lot of the tech founders, these are folks who would never, fold into Trump, but they also are just fundamentally anti-establishment. They have that rebel DNA, that fundamental rebel DNA, just like a lot of those Republicans who will side with dollar green don't really like the current US government, but fundamentally it's my country, right or wrong. Okay. So it's a rotation of the spectrum. If the normal political spectrum is left versus right, this is like top versus bottom. It's like the authoritarian is dollar green and the libertarian is Bitcoin orange. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that rotation is a pretty big shift. I'm not sure what percentage of both parties shift. It might be that orange is like 60% Republican and 40% Democrat or something. But one of the most underappreciated aspects is many, many non-white people will shift to Bitcoin orange. And the reason is that inflation hits like African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and whites all at the same, and if you look, the more equities and other assets you hold, in some ways you're kind of more buffered from this. At least you can have some ups as well as some downs. But inflation is absolutely crushing people of color. And that is something I think, for example, Jack Dorsey, who has Square Cash, that's actually very popular among the African American community, among other communities, and it has a different user base than your typical like tech app. And in fact, he's gone and talked about that, given talks about that, and tweets about that. And so he's probably seeing this in the numbers that inflation is hitting this group harder. So because of that, the moral legitimacy of the establishment is called into question because they define themselves. If you read again, like something like Barbara Walters' book or something, she imagines that this future civil war or conflict will be between a tolerant, diverse establishment and some like 4chan Nazis, right? But that's a wash. That's an easy win. That's a 90-10 win, right? That's 95, 99-1 or whatever, right? When you rotate it and instead it is basically all pro-freedom people who are Bitcoin orange and against inflation, and probably maybe more people of color than not than on the other side. And then you have, well, it's still our flag, it's still our country, it's still our state. That's now set up for something that's much closer to a 50-50, right? That's actually something where a lot of people would be torn between those two groups, And when it's 50-50, unfortunately, that's when conflict is maximal. So that, unfortunately, is how I anticipate things to go.